It's 8 a.m. down by the Thames barrier, and as the tide goes out, we get a peek at a 150-year-old mystery that's just been solved. In an extraordinary discovery, archaeologists have identified the remains of this incredible warship. It might not be much to look at now, but behind me was once one of Britain's greatest warships, HMS Duke of Wellington. And I'm here with the Thames Discovery Programme, whose job it is to scour the foreshore looking for archaeological sites. Gustav Milne is leading the project. Gus, what I don't understand is how this was once a ship, because it looks like a bunch of old timbers to me.
Well, it is a bunch of old timbers. It's a bunch of old timbers from a ship. The ship itself would have been berthed in front of a jetty in midstream, and that's where it would have been dismantled, and all the timbers from it, the planks and the futtocks and the frames and the keels, were dumped here.
So this is the remnants, if you like, the bag of bones.
This is all that's left of the ship that was once over there.
So how do you know it's HMS Duke of Wellington?
Well, we can tell it's a ship, because, and a big ship at that, because look at the proportions of these timbers. Look at the width of these timbers. These are huge. Every single one of them is large. And they've got these very characteristic scarf joints on. And look at this structure here. You don't get curves like that in timber frame buildings. That curve can only come from a ship. It's the side of a ship. The only ship with timbers of this size would be the Royal Naval First Raters, these 100-gun vessels. When it was launched in 1852, HMS Duke of Wellington was the longest ship of its class. It was a three-decker, that's a big ship, and it had 131 guns, so it was one of the largest, most powerful warships in the world.
So in terms of 19th century history, it was hugely significant.
It was indeed. It was the flagship of the Royal Navy, which guarded the British Empire.
Sad to think that this is all that's left of it.
HMS Duke of Wellington is the ultimate expression of Victorian power. In the early 1850s, it's the biggest and most powerful warship afloat. 131 cannon, 5,000 tons of timber. It says to the world, the British are the masters of the sea.
But within 10 years, she was deemed obsolete. And by the turn of the century, she was broken up. The shipbreakers' yard here at Charlton was the resting place for many vessels. So identifying HMS Wellington's remains was a tricky business for the archaeologists. Everywhere I look, there are random timbers lying on the foreshore.
Well, not exactly random. They're what we call ship's timbers. This is a graveyard for ships. It's actually a shipbreaker's yard. You can see not only do we have all these timbers, but there's lots and lots of iron nails, rivets and ship-breaking tools here.
Looking at these timbers, it was obviously a big ship. But just how big exactly? Can you give me some idea of the sort of scale we're talking about here?
We're talking very big indeed. These are the keel timbers, which are the backbone, the spine of the ship. We have a series of bits of the keel here, and laid end to end there'd be 202 feet long. Now this is 2 feet in old imperial measure.
Yeah.
Add another 200 of those and you'll get the size of the vessel. Ahoy there! 202 feet!
Absolutely gigantic!
When HMS Duke of Wellington was ready for sea, she was the biggest, the most impressive warship in the world. She was higher out of the water, wider, longer, more heavily armed. Her timbers, her masts, her sails, everything about her was just that bit bigger than had ever been done before.
Archaeologists treat the site of a shipwreck a bit like it's a crime scene investigation. In other words, first of all they try and establish how long the ship, or the victim if you like, has actually been here. That helps them place an age on the vessel, and then they try and identify it before finally trying to figure out how it actually came to be here. In other words, the cause of death. It was only through a painstaking process of following these steps that the archaeologists could identify the timbers as HMS Duke of Wellington. Their first breakthrough came as they were scrubbing the decks.
One of the timbers are clean, we can actually see things like this inscription here. Can you read that?
Yeah, I can. Is that a V or an A?
It's an A.
L-T. Alt. What does alt mean?
Well, we're missing the first letter. Can you see the remnants of that little letter there?
It's an S, I've got it. It's salt, isn't it? This says salt. What does that mean?
Well, that means that this timber was seasoned in salt water. That's what the Royal Navy did from 1825 onwards. So this, we know this is Royal Naval issue after the Napoleonic Wars. So this is post 1825. Another tantalising clue of how we might be able to date this is the use of this copper. Can you see these green rivets? The whole of the bottom of the vessel was sheathed in copper, which protected it from rotting. Most of this copper has been stripped out left, but we now have some bits of copper left, and we can analyse these, and by 1840, 400 ships had been clad in this metal.
So you can narrow that time window ever more just by examining
Post 1840, yes, that's
a rivet
right.
or a nail.
That's right.
Armed with the knowledge of the ship's approximate age and the fact that she was a first-rater, the next step was to identify her by consulting the records at the National Maritime Museum. So how did you know from all the ship's plans available that that one down on the foreshore is HMS Duke of Wellington?
Well, we've not just been cleaning the timbers, we've been recording them, drawing them in detail. And so we've got an idea of the measurements. So we start to look at some of the many plans that are held at the Maritime Museum. This is the Duke of Wellington, and this matches with the size of timbers that we have down on the foreshore.
Look at that, it seems to be 1, 2, 3 layers there.
Well, the layers at the outside and the inside ones, these are the planking. Not only did we measure the frame timbers, the sides, we also had some pieces of the keel, and we can measure foreshore timbers. The keel there fits exactly the size of the keel on these plans. At that time, the only first rate we know that was broken up at Charlton was the Duke of Wellington.
Right.
So by process of elimination, we've worked out the type of vessel, the size of it, and then looked at documentary evidence as well, and that gives us the Duke of Wellington.
At the time of her creation, HMS Duke of Wellington was state-of-the-art, but as the Industrial Revolution took hold, she was left behind.
The day of that type of ship had gone. New ships with armour plate, built of iron, with much heavier guns on board, had completely taken over. An age of romance and glory connected with the past had finished, and the Navy had to reinvent itself to fight with new weapons in a new age.
Back at the Thames, the tide was coming in again. In a few moments, the shipwreck would be gone.
I'm afraid all this stack of timbers is just going to slowly disintegrate, and the timbers are just going to float off into the North Sea.
It's the tide that will
Yes,
take it away.
the Thames will take them.